Hello and welcome to my week 2 NFL breakdown brought to you by yours truly, the fans coach. So, before you go any further, if you haven't already, go back and watch the last video I posted titled How I Break Down NFL Performance, or some name that's pretty close to that. Go ahead and watch that as I'll be referencing that video and showing graphics that I explain more in that. So, great, I'm back. I assumed you've paused this video and gone and watched that. So we'll just jump right into it. Again, we're going to go through the games chronologically, if that's the correct word. So we're going to start the Thursday night game and go to the Monday night game. How it's going to work is I'm going to go in depth on all the games that I watched for myself, every single play of them, and then I will talk briefly from what I've seen and heard about the other games. And that's going to be about a 50-50 split. So I've watched half of the games in their entirety, and I have not watched the other half, which is probably the split I'm going to keep for the rest of the season, just because I don't have time to watch every single NFL game as much as I would like to. So without further ado, let's get into the first game, the Commies versus the Packers. So you'll notice I have the nice and different visual for this one because I watched this game. So if we take a look at it, this is what my charts are going to look like for the games I have watched. It's going to be two bell curves, one for each team. I'm going to run through it really quick, just in case if anyone didn't follow my instructions and has not gone back to my video and does not know what these mean. Basically, two bell curves, one for each team. The bell curve that's further to the left will denote the team that I think is a little worse than the one that's on the right. So in this case, the Commanders, indicated by the maroon, hopefully you figured that out, are a little worse than the Packers, indicated by the green. Actually, this amount of a gap seems small, but is pretty large. If you'll notice, I've included that little dashed line in the middle of the green bell curve, which indicates that I think the Commanders would have to play like a 65% game. So a game that's pretty far like above average for them to beat the Packers on an average game. So let's just talk about the game now, because I think the rest of it will be pretty self-explanatory. So the Packers are a good team, right? I think last week I would have had their little green bell curve much closer to the Commanders. But given that they have now thrashed both the Lions and the Commanders, who are both solid teams in their own right, I think that they're pretty solid. I think they're definitely a Super Bowl contender. I, for one, underestimated the Micah Parsons trade, although he hasn't had the biggest impact on the game so far, I would say. I think just that numbers mismatch plays a huge difference. You line him up like over the guard, and he's played teams with some shaky guard play, so let's remember that. But having him, Lucas Van Ness, and Rashawn Gary, and Devontae Wyatt, and just as one pass rush unit, man, you're going to get a lot of pressure out of those four guys. And I think a part that's getting overlooked, I think a lot too, is just the performance of the Green Bay linebackers. Like Edgerrin Cooper has been insane. Like I would not be surprised if he makes like second team All Pro. I mean, it's gonna be hard to do at linebacker given that Roquan and Fred Warner exist. I don't remember how many off-ball linebackers make the All Pro, but I think he's really gunning. Not even for Pro Bowl status. Which the Pro Bowl voting is a joke, but whatever. I think he's really gunning for All Pro status. And then the Green Bay secondary too has played shockingly well. I think we knew their safeties were going to be pretty good with Xavier McKinney, obviously, is fantastic. Evan Williams looked really good, but their cornerbacks, particularly Keyshawn Nixon, however you say his name, heard it both ways, sorry. But he has been so good. He's getting a lot of ball production. He's getting a lot of pass breakups and like pretty good ones at that too. And just his stickiness and coverage has really surprised me. I think he's really elevated his game this year. In addition to the Green Bay defense, their offense has really, really been rolling. I think Jordan Love has looked very solid. He hasn't had to do too much, but I'm loving what I'm seeing out of him so far. He's not really turning the ball over. I don't think he's made any of those like really dumb mistakes that you're gonna get from Jordan Love every once in a while. He's really ascended to, I would say, I think he's gonna push that tier 2 quarterback like ranking pretty soon if he keeps up this play, especially with weapons that aren't that great. I think Tucker Kraft has really emerged almost as like the main receiving option for this team, which is pretty nuts. but he's literally been that good. I Watching him this week, I don't think there was much of a difference between him and say George Kittle. Obviously, that's 1 week, but yeah, just that obviously the run after catch ability, well documented, but just very sure hands. He's big enough to play like in line. So you don't need to have like another tight end on the field with him, like you maybe do with Brock Bowers or something. And yeah, he's just such a good player. And then Jaden Reed obviously has a great game here. Stinks that Jaden, I think I totally misspoke. Romeo Dobbs, sorry, had a really good game here too. And then Jaden Reed goes down with the injury on the play. Doesn't even count. That is really unfortunate. It seems like he's going to be out for a few weeks, but I am not too concerned about the Packers receivers, even though probably the most questionable group for them, at least if Zach Tom is healthy. I think Matthew Golden looks really good. They missed two deep shots, but if one of those hits, um, this game is even less close than it was, right? And then Dontavian Wicks had a few good plays too. I think he was out there for the hands team, which is really funny because if you're pretty deep in the football, you know that Dontavian Wicks drops a lot of passes. So let's jump to the visual now. All of this being said, I've given the Packers a 65% performance. I think last week, if what you took about the Packers at the beginning of this season, let me start there. So take the Packers at the beginning of the season, and they played like this would be like an 80 to 85% performance. But I'm honestly ready just to jump and say the Packers are a really, really good team. So I think their average game is going to be a lot better now than I would have said at the beginning of the year. So for that reason, I haven't given them a crazy like game score, if you want to call it that, just at 65%, but very solid. I think they played great. I don't really think there was a part of this team that played poorly, but you hit one of those two deep shots to Matthew Golden, you probably get to like a 70%. If you hit both of them, that's like a 75. I think, I know it was not a close game, but the Commanders' offense did get going like on that last drive. Um, and nothing about the Packers blew me away. I think that all aspects of their team just really executed well. So that's a lot of talk on the Packers. Let's jump to the Commanders. I gave them a 40%. We'll start with their little score there. I mean, the Packers defense in particular just looks to be so good that I don't even know. I mean, this could be like a 50% game for them. It's just hard to tell. They just got dominated by the Packers defense. I think the Commanders are a good team. Um, it's hard to tell just in a blowout, which is really what this game was. The final score ends up being pretty close, but that's just not really how the game felt. I thought there's some good flashes, right? I mean, Deebo Samuel looks really solid. Obviously, he's got the run after catch ability, which we all know about. Even just as like a receiver running routes, which is something I really feel like has been missing the last 2 years on him. It's just watching the Niners play the last 2 years, you just don't really feel confident that Debo's going to give you much as like a receiver who's actually running routes. But he's really been doing that at a high level, by his standards. Not like cream of the crop, but at a pretty solid level for the Commanders. I think their O line held up pretty well considering that they have a rookie tackle, and I believe Sam Cosmi is still out. They held up decently well. I mean, Jaden helps a lot. Even he gets a little banged up in this game. I think might miss next week. And then with the Commanders, I don't really know what to say. I think this is a fine week. I think the the worst part about it is they lose Austin Eckler, who his career might be over, which is really, really sad. I mean, coming back from Achilles tear at like 29 or 30 years old, like he is, that's going to be really rough. And it's so tough because he was looking so good. I mean, like, I think it was the game last week against the Giants. He had a crazy running catch on third down where he like pulled off three juke moves, like back to back to back, spun past the defender and barely picks up a first down. It was an insane play from a guy who you think is going to be a little less agile, a little less explosive given his age. But no, honestly, he was playing great football. Just, maybe not quite as explosive and obviously reduced workload, but you hate to see him get injured. Hopefully, we'll see him back in the league, but I wouldn't count on it, sadly. Okay, so the next game I want to talk about is the Giants Cowboys game. Um, what a game. There's a lot to talk about here. Obviously, this was a super fun game to watch. I mean, the score reflects that. The stats reflect that. Just watching the game, it was a blast, and I think there's a lot of takeaways from this game, right? So first of all, let's just get the visual out of the way because I think most of what I have to say is kind of deeper conversations, mostly about the Giants. I think both teams played pretty solid. Just gonna do both of the teams' analysis at once, I guess. I think it's pretty similar what happened for both teams. I really didn't know where to put them on the bell curve, like how good did these teams play. So I just settled that they both played like a 65% game. I think offensively, like both of these teams obviously were borderline unstoppable. I think maybe that can be due to a poor defensive performances as well, which maybe stopped me from putting these at like an 80% performance. I think, yes, both good offensive performances and poor defensive performances happen at the same time. So if I had originally had this game at like a 50-50 for each team, just because I'm like, if your offense plays great and your defense doesn't play great, like I guess you played average. But just out of respect for uh, the funness, not a word, I just used it, deal with it. Out of respect for that, and just how well I think the quarterbacks and receivers played, I put it at 65%. But the only thing I do want to talk about here with the visual too is the difference between the Cowboys and the Giants. As you can see, I have about a little less than a 60% indicator there, which means I think it would take about, a 55 to a 58% a performance out of the Giants to beat the Cowboys on average. I really was high on the Giants coming into this season, and I think these teams are pretty close. Coming into the season, I might have even put them on like the same tier of team. But I think Dallas has just really shown to be a solid team. The defense looked very good against the Eagles in week one. Offense looks pretty good. The offense looked great week two. The defense not so great. But overall, I believe in their defense enough. It's really shocking to me that they got torched through the air, which I think the Cowboys' run defense is more so the concern. Obviously, Kenny Clark swapping in with Micah Parsons kind of flips that, so you get a little more run defense, stoutness out of Kenny Clark, and lose pass rushing. But still, I think the secondary is probably the best part of the Dallas defense at this point, and I'm a little surprised to see that they got cooked. Yet overall, I don't know how much analysis I have on this game. It was super fun to watch. Um, Cam Scatterboo gets his first rushing touchdown. That is super fun. I mean, the rush he had before that touchdown was just electric. Just displaying the burst, the power, everything. And I'm so glad they rewarded him with that little 1 yard touchdown. I do want to talk about Russ. I think this was his career high in passing yards, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, he played a really good game. I think despite the O line being horrendous for the Giants, which I will talk about in a little bit, he really played well. And, ends on a sour note. He has a deep ball that just felt like Russ was cooking too much. Yeah, he would say that. That's why I said Russ was cooking. Sorry, but yeah, I just think he got a little too confident in the deep ball. It had worked a few too many times, and he's just like, screw it, neighbors down there somewhere. I think it was intended for neighbors, and he just throws it right to a defender. That stinks. But the rest of the game, Russ was just on fire. He was really good. It was fun to see Wandale Robinson get involved down the field, on the other side of the line of scrimmage for a change. I think I heard a stat that he ended last year with like almost 100 receptions, or somewhere around 100 receptions, but like less than 700 receiving yards or something. I think it was like 90 for like 690. And that is literally insane. Like, obviously he's been primarily used as a gadget screen guy, but fun to see him get down the field and make some good catches. I don't think he's proven to be exceptional at it. Obviously, he's got enough speed, so with the right, pass from Russell Wilson, there could be something there, but I probably wouldn't be giving him too many downfield targets, especially when Blake Neighbors is obviously going to be much better. And I think Darius Slayton is also a better deep threat at this point. So I think Wandale is fine in his role, but that was fun to watch. And on Dallas, I don't know how much analysis I have. I think Javonte Williams, I mentioned this in the last video, he's continued to look really good. I think watching him and Scadaboo, it was kind of almost like watching the same player. They're both just really physical runners who have decent burst. I've been really surprised by Javante's quickness just because that was something that's completely gone the last 2 years. Again, not back to his old days, but better than I thought. What I do want to talk about is Brian Daboll and the Giants just as an organization. I really like Brian Daboll. I think Brian Daboll is a really good coach. I think that was on full display in 2022, where he coached a Giants team that was not very talented, in my opinion, to the playoffs. And I think they even won a playoff game against the Vikings. That was very, very impressive. I think that was his first year with the Giants. And I think he's kind of been dealt a bad hand in New York. But games like this make me rethink my opinions on Brian Dable. It's one thing when you have a horrible O line, Daniel Jones, who we'll talk about later, and just a weird receiving core and just the rest of the team being weird. Like you always felt like there was a little bit of talent, but this never got put on the field. Then obviously Saquon Barkley, like you can excuse him for having bad years with those teams, but games like this, man, where like it just seems like everything goes right, at least on the offensive side of the ball, and they still lose it. Like, at what point do you start to look at the coaching? I think it was, obviously the defense that let the Giants down here, but yeah, I don't know, man. I think at a certain point, if you lose enough, I just have to question your ability as a head coach. So I'm sure he'll resurface somewhere as an OC or a head coach, maybe even elsewhere. But I don't know, man. I think the last thing I want to say is the Giants' decision just to kind of give Dallas a lot of space on that last drive that ends with the field goal in overtime was really questionable. I think Dallas has an absolute like certified asset in Brandon Aubrey, where like they literally just ended the game in one play, kind of. I think off a punt, they had the ball in pretty good field position. One play, they get like 20 yards, and they're in range for like a 50 to 60-yard field goal. With Brandon Aubrey, you feel really good about that. So they could literally just run the ball, and it felt like the Giants lost the game on that one like pass play. They got Dallas in the field goal range, and I don't really like the defense they called there. It was pretty soft. I really wanted to see them make Dallas work for each and every single yard on that drive. So I want to be high on the Giants, but I don't know if I can. I think just they've been bad for. I think just this O line is the best example of this. Ever since they got Saquon, like what in 2018 or something, like their O line just hasn't been good. They've invested in it like a decent amount and a little bit in the draft, enough in free agency. You'd really expect more. So I don't know. I'm really excited to see what happens the rest of the year for both of these teams, but I'm really concerned about Brian Table and just the Giants as an organization. Okay, so the next game we're going to talk about here is the Jaguars Bengals game. I didn't watch this game, which is why we're on football reference for this one, because I'm not going to make my bell curves for a game I didn't watch. But I really wish I could have. I just had to pick between a few, and this didn't make the cut. Um, let's just start with the Joe Burrow injury. It seems like he's probably going to be out for the year. I know it says about 3 months, but turf toe is typically a out for the year injury. I think it's just we don't really know how quarterbacks recover from it because I don't know if there's been a quarterback who's had turf toe recently, and it's going to be pretty rough surgery. So that sucks. I don't think the Bengals season is over, but this is kind of a lost season, I would say. Obviously, they still win this game just because Drake Browning is a pretty competent backup, but it seems like Joe Burrow may be back for the playoffs, which is why I'm holding out hope. But we've seen Joe Burrow be a bit rough, like coming back from an injury or um, while being a little hurt. I think just the beginning of the past 5 years has 4 years has been an example of that. Like he seems to always be injured. In some of those games, man, he does not play well. It's typically towards like week 4 when he starts to turn it on, and that's probably when he's more healthy. So I'm a bit concerned about that, but I don't want to be too much of a downer. I do still think the Bengals are alive. they're first in the AFC North, which is pretty crazy. And I think Jake Browning's a very capable backup. So let's go into the stats. We'll start with the Jaguars. I think they're going to be listed here first as the away team. Yeah, again, I didn't watch the game, so I don't have too much to say, but I heard Trevor Lawrence played better. I think you see that in the stats. I did go back and watch the Jaguars and Panthers game after recording my week one video, I believe, and yeah, I was kind of unimpressed with Trevor Lawrence in week one. I felt like he did his job, and that was about it. I think I would say that looks to what happened here. I don't like the three turnovers from him, but like Trevor Lawrence is a talented player. I think the conversation with the Jags offense is going to be more based around the receivers, but we'll jump to the running backs now. Travis Etienne has another good game, of course. I didn't watch it, but even in the stats and what I've heard, you can verify that. The Bengals defense has seemed like better than last year, so yeah, I wouldn't say 14 for 71 is a bad performance just because I think the Bengals defense has looked okay. And yeah, that's exciting. Travis Etienne really was a disappointment last year. He just didn't look good. So it's glad to see him be back, and the Jaguars have enough faith in him that they traded Tank Bixby. But I think that was more a confidence play in Bayshaw Tootin. Just very like explosive guy in both phases, and yeah, I'm excited to watch him more on this Jaguars team. And then Lakeith Allen, I don't know, that's a fun name. I enjoy watching him play because of that. I think the conversation about the Jaguars really sours when you get to the receivers. So, from what I heard, Brian Thomas came into this game kind of injured, wasn't listed in the injury designation, but had some sort of apparent wrist injury. And yeah, you don't like what you've seen from him this year. I mean, a lot of targets, few receptions, just hasn't looked good. So hey, it sounds wrong, but you hope that this is due to an injury and that, you know, hopefully he'll be looking the way he did at the end of last year. But worth noting that a lot of his production last year came without Trevor Lawrence. So that seemed more impressive last year, but now that you'd expect him to build on that with Trevor Lawrence back, but I don't know, maybe there's just some missing chemistry. Maybe Thomas just had great chemistry with Mac Jones. I don't know. I think Brian Thomas is fine, but we'll see. Travis Hunter, nothing I have to say about the player, right? But you trade like two first round picks and a second round pick just to hardly use the guy. I don't really get it. I understand maybe the first year you kind of just want to take it slow, getting him used to the NFL, used to the playbooks. But I was really just hoping that if you give those assets up for him, like you just plug him in on both sides of the ball and he'll be a superstar. That's what I was hoping for. I get that, he probably can't play both positions full time. I was hoping to see him maybe play 40% of the defensive snaps and like 90%, 80% of the offensive snaps. And the usage has even been a little lower than that. And that's really disappointing. So let's get him involved. Brenton Strange, I was thinking about picking him up in a fantasy league to be my starting tight end because Evan Ingram sucks. But the Broncos have not used Evan Ingram. And instead, I picked Jawan Johnson up over Brenton Strange, and very happy in that decision. Yeah, with the Bengals, I mean, you see it in the stats. You've seen it in the past. Jake Browning is a very capable backup. The three picks is a little concerning. I don't know. I imagine it can just be hard to come into a game filling in for an injured player and you're not expecting to play. But Jake Browning's a very capable backup. I think he's done this in the past to just hyper target Jamar Chase. So from a fantasy outlook, Chase will probably be fine. T. Higgins probably not, which is unfortunate because I have T. Higgins in a league. Took him in the back of the second round at the time. Regretted the pick, and I am regretting that pick even more. So I think the Bengals, I think they could very easily win 9 games if Browning plays the rest of the regular season. They're 2-0 right now, and I think expecting them to go what, like 7-8 the rest of the way is very likely. So we'll see. I don't know how much I have to say about the Bengals and the Joe Burrow stuff. Similar to the Giants, though, man, you got to get that O line. I'm afraid Joe Burrow's career will go down as a pretty tragic one at this point. If he has one more season long injury after this, I think we're starting to get to that area. Um, yeah, the last thing I want to say on the Bengals is this: Shamar Stewart has been pretty solid. I don't know if I talked about it in the last video. Obviously, I didn't watch this game, but he looked really good in week one, and I think I will go back and watch this game probably on like Saturday or maybe Thursday. So I'm very curious to see how he played. Okay, so we got to get going through these a little faster, but this was another banger of a game, man. This was, yeah, pump pump the horse matchup into my game. The horse bull. If you bet on this game, you bet on horses fighting. So that's incredible. This was such a fun game to watch, man. Um, I think both teams played well, and the Colts end up winning. The Broncos should have won if Will Lutz makes that field goal, and then they get, the leverage call. And yeah, that Colts kicker had no chance of making a 60-yard field goal, dude. I mean, I feel like, hindsight 2020, but the Colts have like a new kicker, and I feel like you probably have enough scouting, maybe just even like the eye test on this guy from earlier in the game. Like, okay, he probably can't make a 60-yard field goal. Like, I think you just got to tell your guys on special teams, hey, man, whatever you do, do not get called for a penalty here, because that's the only way we lose this game. So, maybe that's just me operating with too much hindsight, but yeah, it's just funny that kicker had no shot at making a 60-yarder. Maybe that was just a fluke, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about the Broncos first, the losing team. So they come in on the road against Indianapolis and really rebounds well off of a poor Week One game against the Titans. Bo Nix really settled down a lot. Like I talked about in the last video, like he was just improvising and playing just really reckless against the Titans, which I didn't really mind. You don't want to see him play like that and then, have I think four turnover worthy plays. But it's like, maybe he's just trying things out, just trying to get comfortable. Maybe there's more being put on his plate. So I really like to see him just settle back in, show a little bit of that, that flavor of the. Like there was one play he rolls out and just makes a great pass on the run to Troy Franklin. Just a great chemistry play there. But yeah, I love him extending the play and finding Franklin there. I don't know how much I have to say on the Broncos. They're just a really solid team. I think we'll talk about the disparity between those bell curves. They're pretty tight, which I think is more of a compliment to the Colts than it is a slight to the Broncos. Like you still see that I have the Colts, excuse me, playing a 60% game to beat the Broncos on an average day. So I would still say the Broncos are like a better team. Um, but yeah, the Colts have really impressed. But finishing out the conversation on the Broncos, I think it was just a rough matchup. Their defense is really stout, but like they do give up that underneath stuff, which Daniel Jones was just really playing well into that. He was taking what the defense gave him. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's not a great matchup. I think if the Broncos are facing a good running back too, the run defense can be a little shaky, but I think the Broncos defense played fine. I think about maybe a little below average game for them, but again, more testament to Colts offense. The Broncos run game is quite impressive with J.K. Dobbins putting up the numbers he is. The Broncos O line is obviously really, really good. You see that just watching the game too. And I think it's speaks volumes to what a pretty limited J.K. Dobbins at this point in his career can do, and a rookie in R.J. Harvey. They both are getting pretty good space to run. So if you're the Broncos, you're really not concerned. I think you most of the times you win a game against the Colts in which you played this well. So excited to see how their season progresses and Bo Nix continues to look. For the Colts, man, what a great game. Daniel Jones just really played like a veteran quarterback. I don't know how else to say. He just took what was there. It felt like he didn't really make any mistakes. Um, he was able to mix things up, like when they needed deep shots, he looked confident, delivered a few, you know, when it was available, like that one at the end of the first half to Alec Pierce. Great ball, seeing that Moss is pressed up against Alec Pierce. Yeah, that's probably a matchup that you want to take going deep. And yeah, a little underthrown, but good ball to Pierce. Just lets his receiver make a play. I think just in that situation, that's exactly what you want to do. Jonathan Taylor just looked great. Sucks that Daniel Jones is vulturing his goal line touchdowns, but he gets one regardless. Looking fantastic. The Colts O line I thought played very well against the Broncos defense. Their pass rush in particular, obviously Nick Benito had his wins. Just you're not going to stop him every play. He's just so quick. But yeah, other than that, I didn't really feel like there was too much pressure getting to Daniel Jones except on the blitzes. The Broncos defense is, yeah, they are good, and I'm very impressed with the Colts performance just all around, man. Everyone on this offense played super great, and I will be picking up Daniel Jones in fantasy because I have a bad habit of taking quarterbacks very late, so usually I have to find one off the waiver wire, and yeah, I think I found my guy. But yeah, I guess I just want to wrap it up with the Giants conversation again. Seeing Daniel Jones be like the last piece of this Colts offense has been tough for the Giants, I would say. Like, clearly he's a capable quarterback. I think the scheme and Shane Steichen are doing a lot of the lifting here for the Indianapolis offense, but Daniel Jones is really just getting the most out of the scheme, which again brings me back to the Brian Daboll conversation. Before the season, I might have even had a little more faith in Daboll than Steichen, but yeah, given just that Daniel Jones wasn't good on the Giants and is now good on the Colts, I feel like I maybe blame Anthony Richardson for the Colts struggles as opposed to Shane Steichen. And I think that's even backed up by the Colts being a lot of close games last year that they just lost. I think this roster is pretty solid. Again, I was pretty low on the roster coming into the year, but the rosters looked fine. And yeah, Daniel Jones just is making it work. So I think maybe the biggest takeaway from this game for me is I'm really concerned about like what's going to happen in New York, and I think Anthony Richardson is about cooked. I said the last thing I want to discuss once or twice now already, but the last thing I want to discuss, and there'll be one more thing after this, just so you know. Yeah, Tyler Warren looks great. I think right now, I think for me, the jury's still out. What completed this offense, Daniel Jones or Tyler Warren? But Tyler Warren has been very, very huge in this offense. And I'm very impressed with the ways that Steichen has designed to get him the ball and get him going in the open field. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is Xavier Howard somehow is like still in the NFL and was playing for the Colts this game. And boy, did he get cooked, dude. Oh my gosh. I think there was one drive he got called for like 3 or 4 penalties in like a span of 6 plays. Oh man, he struggled. I saw a cornerback with the last name Howard for the Colts, and I'm like, who is that? Like, I'm like, is this like a rookie? Like, did I miss someone? Is this a rookie, bro? But yeah, it was Xavier Howard, and yeah, that was pretty apparent when he got flagged. Like, yeah, this is a washed 32-year-old playing cornerback, so maybe he just needs to get his feet under him. But boy, that was hard to watch. Okay, so the next game I want to talk about, back on Football Reference, is the Bears Lions game. I did not watch this game. Again, this is one I really want to go back and watch, but yeah, this is a fun one. Ben Johnson coaching against his former team. I don't know like what happened in his return. Like I really should have watched this game, man. I don't know if he got booed or what, but so I don't have any previous knowledge. I'm saying this. If you're a Lions fan and like are booing Ben Johnson, I don't know. Just be grateful that he gave you an extra year as the OC. And if your team didn't fall apart due to injuries last year, you might have gotten to the Super Bowl. It's hard to say that because the Eagles are so dominant at the end of last year, but you had a chance at the Super Bowl, and yeah, just be grateful for Ben Johnson for that. As far as the game goes, let's start with the Lions. Let's go down the stats here. This isn't gonna be a stats conversation though. I'm so happy to see them bounce back. If you watched my video from last week, I was very concerned about the Lions. I think that's more just a testament to the Packers defense at this point. But I think my criticisms of the Lions were pretty valid in that I think their guards, Christian Mahogany and Tate Ratledge, had a poor game. I don't know how they played here. Obviously, that didn't hold them back from going like nuclear on the offensive side of the ball. So, yeah, you'd love to see that. And little reservations about the play calling against the Packers game, but that also just seems to be more due to the Packers defense. So I don't know really what I have to say about the Lions. Just everything looks at, fine for them after this week too. I think this is just a really encouraging game. The Bears defense has been pretty bad, like especially against the pass without Jalen Johnson, being hurt. Their defense just has looked really porous. So I think maybe the jury is still out on just how good is this Lions team going to be, but this was certainly an encouraging game. Yeah, you love to see like this kind of efficiency. I mean, these are like nearly Madden numbers. 28 passing attempts for Goff with 330 yards, 5 touchdowns, 12 carries for 94 for Gibbs, 11 for 57 for Montgomery. You can look at the receiving numbers. Just, yeah, I would love to see the Lions average yards per play from this game. The conversation in this game sours when you turn to the Bears. I think like I haven't watched either of the Bears games yet. I need to do that, but from the little I've seen and just what I've heard, Caleb Williams looks to be playing well, so that's great. Yeah, DeAndre Swift, bro, I feel so bad for Ben Johnson having to have Swift as your running back again. Just always fumbling the ball still and running with bad vision. And yeah, I would have loved to see them take a running back earlier in the draft. I don't know how Kyle Monangai looked on his 7 attempts this game, but there was a lot of talented running backs. It seemed like they're trying to position for one in the draft, but they just kept getting sniped. But yeah, I'm sure Ben Johnson's probably punching air, having to watch DeAndre Swift carry the ball for him again. Um, I think Roma Dunze has been great. Just another reminder that receivers aren't always going to be good in their first year. We've been blessed by a lot of those, but that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes you're Jamar Chase, other times you have Shane Waldron as your offensive coordinator. The last thing I want to say about this game is the usage of Luther Burden and Colston Loveland. And just really the Bears drafting as a whole, taking Ozzy Trapillo and Kieran Amagaji last year, and I think they took another O lineman in the second round this year as well. From that Panthers pick they got. I don't remember the name though, so sorry about that. But it's you can't help but like wonder if that draft capital could have been better spent on two backup O linemen and an extra receiver and tight end. I was listening to the NFL Stock Exchange, and they said, "Why do you take Luther Burden when you have, um, Luther Burden at home, i.e., DJ Moore?" And I don't know that made me voluntarily exhale at work, just because yeah, that's a great thought. Why do you take Luther Burden on the top of the second you had DJ Moore? I think there are, especially given Luther Burden's like personality, supposedly of being kind of a diva, wanting the ball, which fair. He was a great player at Missouri. you kind of worry when you make him like the fifth option in your offense. Maybe there are too many mouths to feed. But a fine process, I guess. If I talked about like five picks that kind of seem iffy, if he's like the one of those five or the two of those five, maybe even three of those five players that you take, that's fine, right? But him getting two targets and Loveland getting one target here, just like I know they're rookies, but like what are you doing? Like why are you taking these guys with like super high draft picks if you're just gonna throw the ball to Cole Kmet and your other receivers? You have Roma Dunze and DJ Moore. Like you have a great receiver in DJ Moore. You have a guy who you just spent like the number 9 overall pick on, I think. Like, why do you take Loveland at what 10 and then Burden at the top of the second? Like when you see that your defense is just getting like gashed without their without their starters. Like you would really, really wish that they had maybe invested in their defense a little more. I don't know. Just just a thought there. But with the O line picks, like I get it. You know, you definitely want to come in having 7, 8 O linemen, if you're lucky that are playable. But with other holes on your team, you really just have to question if that's the best drafting. So I don't know. I think if the Bears don't have a great season here, I think Ryan Poles he's gone for sure. I mean, I don't think if Caleb Williams continues to play like this and you just bring in Ben Johnson, who is an elite offensive mind, it I don't know. Heads have to roll if this season like results in the Bears getting a top 10 pick, and I think it's Poles that's gonna go. Okay, so we're still on football reference. The next game I want to talk about is the Niners Saints. Did not watch this game, which is why we're on football reference, but this is probably going to be the game I talk about the least. The Niners just take care of business against the Saints. It's fun to see Kyle Shanahan have the quarterback he's always wanted in Mac Jones. And yeah, I think I obviously didn't watch this game, but it's not a shocker to me that Mac Jones played well. He just definitely fits that Shanahan system. I don't know what there is to say really about this game. Just the Niners take care of business against the Saints team. This looks pretty good. But yeah, I don't know. Just focus on the Niners more. I think they have a talented team. Would have loved to see Pearsall get more work. He was playing in a fantasy league that I just barely lost in. So, hate to see the targets going Jennings' way, just from a selfish point of view. But yeah, Niners are injured pretty pretty badly once again. You hate seeing Kittle go down, it looks like, for a few weeks. And yeah, this team is just going to be pretty competitive once again when their guys come back. I think last year was kind of like a floor season for them. Like, I don't really see how the Niners are any worse than they were last year. That seemed like, I think DEFCON 1 is the worst. It was like the most extreme. So that was kind of like, the worst possible outcome. I think they're headed for about a 10 or 11 win season. I yeah, I don't know what I have to say. I think they're kind of just holding on to some pieces like from their championship window. I would say their championship window is over at this point. I just don't really know how they're going to compete with the Packers, the Lions, the Eagles. So that's sad, Even as a Cardinals fan, like this Niners team was super fun. They just had such a stacked team, and it sucks they just never got it done. And then I think last year was the last year of their window, and yeah, just decimated by injuries. So this Niners team has continued to be competitive. Yeah, hopefully they can just stay in kind of like that retooling window, and they hit on some draft picks, which gotta start hitting your draft picks, Niners. That's probably why you're not in your window right now, but start hitting on some of those. Some NFC teams regress. Yeah, you're right back in this thing in like 2 years. So yeah, Niners are a solid team, and love to see them just take care of business here against the Saints team. As I said, that's been pretty solid. I didn't watch this game, but it seems like the dink and dunk strategy seems to be what the Saints are going with. Just give Kamara a lot of carries, give Rattler a lot of short yardage plays, and that like works like that's good offensive philosophy by Kellen Moore, but like what are you really doing? Like when you do that for this team, like obviously I'm not advocating for the Saints to tank, but I feel like you're really just not developing your players. You're not seeing what you have in Rattler. You're not letting them go to Tyler Shuck. If you're just telling Rattler just to like throw the ball short a ton, so I don't know. Like it's good coaching, but like you're just not going to win these games, right? If you're just like playing slightly above average, like with this roster, that's just not going to cut it. Like that'll probably get you like 3 to 5 wins, but is that what you want? You know, like I enjoyed watching the Saints last year. Just they were decimated by injuries, right? But continue just to like get MVS and take those deep shots, and yeah, that was fun. And watching this Saints team last week against the Cardinals was just not fun. Jawan Johnson, yeah, thanks for helping my one of my fantasy teams out, brother. Um, Definitely been a little underutilized for his career. Like when they use him, he goes off. Just kind of like one of those big slot tight ends that maybe just Jawan Johnson's a little few years early in the league. If he entered the league at the same time as Brock Bowers, maybe he has somewhat similar career arc. Not the same caliber of player, but you know what I mean. Yeah, Nick Bosa gets another sack too for the Niners. Just looking at those stats, so he had at least one last week, and yeah, excited to see his season because man, he is just racking up the stats right now. That is for sure. Okay, so the next game I want to talk about is this Patriots Dolphins game. This was a really interesting game. So yeah, we're back to the bell curves. Let me just talk about the bell curve really quick. I have the Dolphins noticeably farther to the right on the bell curve than the Patriots. Again, doesn't look like a lot, but if you look, I would say it would take about a 65% game from the Patriots to beat a average game from the Dolphins. The Dolphins are 0-2, right? But I think there's still something there. Let's just all go in the conversation with the Dolphins, man. Last year, the Dolphins obviously lose Tua and lose a few other people to injury. Jalen Waddle's out a lot. Tyreek Hill doesn't do too much. I still think he looked fine. I'll talk about that later. But the Dolphins still have something going with their passing attack, and I really enjoyed watching them like push the ball down the field a little more this game. They didn't do too many of those screenplays, and whenever they did, I was really disappointed. I felt like they had a lot more success like throwing the ball down the field. Um, and that was really fun to see. I think just with some of the investments the Dolphins have made, Jonas Savanaia, Kenneth Grant, just some of those. Hey, let's change our identity picks. Like, yes, they were too late. You really been should have doing that last year. But I think this Dolphins team is still pretty good, man. I think their offense was rolling. I could change my tune on this. Like the Patriots' pass defense has just looked like Swiss cheese without Christian Gonzalez, so it could be due to that. But just watching the game, I was pretty impressed with that to Tyreek to Waddle connection. I really felt like it looked like the Dolphins did in 2023. And I do want to remind people too that the Dolphins won like what 6 to 8 games. I think it was 7 games last year just with everything that went wrong. So yeah, I think and last year I think was kind of like a worst case scenario. I think the team got a little worse, right? Because like you lose like Javon Holland, you lose like more secondary players. Jalen Ramsey, Minka Fitzpatrick is not the same caliber as Jalen Ramsey. I think you lose like Jordan Fuller, I believe, was back there as well for the Dolphins. And so yeah, you still lose players, which, just that's what happens when you pay to a Tyreek and Jalen Waddle all that money. So not great team building, but I think this Dolphins team is still pretty good, which is why I have them um, noticeably farther ahead than the Patriots. But yeah, I don't know what there's to say. I don't think the Dolphins played a great game. I think the special teams blunder of allowing the kickoff return, the interception at the end by Tua, the O line not playing great. Although without Liam Eichenberg, I think it did show a little more promise. With the defense being pretty porous outside of a few splash plays by Jordan Brooks and their edge rushers, which that's something I also didn't mention about the Dolphins last year, but they're missing their two good edge rushers. So even with the emergence of Chop Robinson, yeah, um, you lost Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, and you have them back this year. So outside of them and Jordan Brooks, this defense is horrendous. So that's why I gave them a 45%. Like, yeah, as high as I am on the Dolphins, like this is the game you saw is probably going to be like an average Dolphins game. I think if they lead more into that downfield passing and just creative run design and getting Achan involved in the passing game, would it make sense on more than just those stupid screen plays? The Dolphins are a pretty solid team, and I think we'll, you know, could win up to 9 games, even with a roster that's a little questionable. Yeah, okay, yeah, let's talk about the Patriots. We'll start with Drake May. Drake May had a really good game. I was impressed. I think their first drive on like a third and medium, third and long, I want to say, he took a check down, and I wrote down in my notes, I'm like, is Drake May just Derek Carr with wheels? And like, I didn't want to think that because I like Drake May, but man, like, I just you hate to see a quarterback take a check down on third and long, and that's something I've seen him do a decent amount. But the rest of this game, yeah, could not have been any less similar to that. Jake May was playing very well. I think he was getting the ball out in time. He was using his legs very well, and hard to tell because the Dolphins' defense is pretty beat up. Like even with their depleted secondary this year, they had injuries. So I think Kader Kohu and Storm Duck are out, and yeah, I don't know if I could have named a single like Dolphins defensive back this game besides Minka Fitzpatrick. Maybe I'm missing someone obvious, but yeah, I didn't even know who was out there to be honest. But and the Patriots I think played a good game. I gave them a 60% performance. They come out like there's a pretty good gap between that blue, which is kind of you know um, in front of that dotted white line. There's a pretty good gap between the Dolphins and the Patriots. I think the Patriots did play a good game. I realize now my numbers might be. I may have like put lines in the wrong spots so that the numbers look a little off, but hopefully you get what I. Hopefully my explanation makes more sense to visualization. That's the goal here, right? Listen to my words. Don't just look at the pretty pictures. Yeah, pretty's a. Yeah, it's very generous. These graphics are not the best looking, but I try my best. But yeah, the Patriots look good. Kayshon Boutte, Booty, however you say his name. I feel like it's Boutte. I would love it if it's Booty. Don't get me wrong, but like I think it's Boutte. I think I'm wrong. Anyway, he's looked good. He just had a good catch in this game. He just didn't get targeted a ton. Obviously, week one looked good for him, but you'd love to see him emerge as a quality receiving option for May. Travion Henderson has like 3 holding calls, which is really funny. And I don't really know if I like the usage of him. It just seems confusing if you play him a lot last week and then now you go back to Stevenson. Like, what do you try? I don't know what they're trying to do there, but yeah, he looks pretty good. That's exciting. Stevenson had a good game too, but again, is that because he's good or the Dolphins defense is bad? Last thing I want to say, man. Two last things. It's tradition at this point. Um, yeah, the Patriots kicker is not good. Like, ditch the arm sleeve, bruh. Like, hit a kick or two before you put that thing back on, dog. And yeah, the other last thing is whoever edited this game, like the condensed game on NFL Plus, like the audio was messed up and like there was like 2 or 3 plays that were just in completely the wrong spot. So not a pleasurable game to view on that. But overall, this was a fun game. I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see where these two teams go. I think maybe the Patriots are on an upward trend and the Dolphins are on a downward trend, but yeah, we'll see if that keeps up. Okay, so we're back on Football Reference for the Bills Jets game. Um, yeah, I don't really know where to start here. I think I've heard a decent amount about this game from various sources, and despite not watching it, some opinions. Let's start with the Jets. It's tough. Let's go down to their stats. Like Justin Fields looks like really, really good against the Steelers. Like, the Steelers defense hasn't looked too great, but I think Justin Fields just played a really great game against them and just absolutely like runs runs all over the bed, if you know what I mean. Uh, Against the Bills here, like 3 for 11, like he looked so just decisive and accurate in his passing against the Steelers. Like what happened? Brees Hall, no success on the grounds, and the Bills defense didn't look that good against the Ravens. So I mean, I think the Bills defense is good. I think the Ravens game was the fluke here, not this game. But yeah, that's really disappointing. Just the Jets really struggled the last few years just to be taken seriously, I feel like, and you may be on that path again as a Jets fan. So yeah, I'm sorry about that, man. I think, again, listening to NFL Stock Exchange, this is not my own take, right? But hearing them talk about Arian Smith, I didn't realize he got drafted before like Alec Manor, which, you know, this is week 2, but I think just they were saying like the consensus boards at the time, like, yeah, Alec Manor is way ahead of Arian Smith. I think this week just leaves a bad taste in your mouth as a Jets fan with Arian Smith having a minus 10-yard run and Alec Manor like looking really, really good in his second game. So I don't know what I have to say about the Jets here. I'm probably not going to watch this game just because watching blowouts kind of sucks, especially when you know it's going to happen. But yeah, there's some fun parts of this team to watch. So watching the O line develop will be great, and yeah, hopefully. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback next week or going forward. I think it's I think Fields might have gotten hurt a little bit, so I'm pretty sure it's at least Taylor for next week. But yeah, we'll see what happens with this Jets team. You have one really good game and one really bad game from them, so we'll see what comes of them. But let's talk about the Bills. Yeah, James Cook is really, really good. The hesitancy to pay him, I think, was just really strange. The Bills have a tendency to sign their players early and just be pretty like both team and player friendly. Like they'll pay you, right, if you do well, but like, they also kind of there's a team friendly aspect of that where they get a little bit of discount because they pay people early. I don't understand the hesitancy to pay James Cook. He's just so good. I mean, like, were they scared because last year was an outlier in touchdowns? Like, I think just watched him last year and like, man, this guy's he's not like an elite running back, but he is a very nice contributor to this offense, and the offense would certainly not be as good without him. He's a very explosive player who you can really give all types of touches to, and he can make things happen. I think that was pretty evident in that awesome long touchdown run he had, just like showing a little bit of power and a ton of explosiveness. You see him at the goal line being able to punch it in, and obviously we know he's an explosive player and a pretty solid receiver. Although Ty Johnson takes most of the receiving work just because he's like actually an absurd receiving back, which you would not expect out of him. But yeah, he's a great player. I don't know what else you have to say. I mean, Josh Allen doesn't have a great game, but like you don't really need him to do anything here. So yeah, I think that's about it on this game. I think the concern about the Bills from week 1 has passed. In this Jets team, you really just don't know what you're gonna get. So we're gonna need to collect a little more data from them. Okay, so we're staying on Football Reference here with the Browns Ravens. I think I'm just gonna finish up with all the games I didn't watch and then go into the games I did watch. Actually, we're not gonna do that. But anyway, yeah, this game was pretty competitive, as you can see just from like the scoring breakdown. Like it was 3-10 at halftime, so Not as much of a blowout as the game seemed. It turned into that, obviously. I love how the Ravens just keep Lamar in for the blowout, and he just like feeds his receivers. So that's pretty fun. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just as simple as the Ravens are a good team. The Browns are a bad team with an anemic offense, but a defense that looks good, especially in the run game. I mean, they shut down Derrick Henry after he looks super, super explosive last week. Yeah, I think the Browns defense is, if you're gonna put them on that bell curve that I've been showing for teams, the maybe the 95% outcome was 2023, and like the 30% outcome was last year. They're probably, I would say they're looking to be on the better side of 50. So yeah, I mentioned the Ravens a bit. Let's start with the Browns. I mean, Joe Flacco's just slinging the rock because they found themselves just needing to throw the ball. Even though like their run keeps been pretty good, but yeah, I don't know if you want Joe Flacco throwing the ball 45 times when you have just rookie running backs, and he's not being super successful on these 45 attempts. I mean, Jared Goff, 28 attempts, had 330 passing yards, and Joe Flacco has 200 passing yards and 45 attempts. Very different teams, very different games, but I think that tells you a lot. But yeah, I think with the Browns, there's some exciting pieces on offense. Like they're watchable football just with that defense being the way it is. Miles Garrett being the absolute just maybe like the best play. I think the best player in the league at this point. Um, him just being who he is in the offense, having just the rookie running backs, Harold Fannin, David Njoku's fun to watch. Jerry Judy, I think, is enjoyable. Yeah, this Browns team I think is going to be a little better than people thought, just because that defense looks like it's more back to where it was. I think another guy I want to throw I think is Greg Newsome. I always get him and Martin Emerson confused. I think Greg Newsome is back outside where he's been playing in the slot. Again, could be mixing those guys up, but yeah, that he's just been playing much much better. You saw it last week as well. So that and just like consistency. Mason Graham, I think, has two TFLs in this game. Oh, one TFL. But yeah, Mason Graham has a good game. I don't think he's really gotten involved in the pass rush yet, but yeah, he's just shoring up that interior D line, which was not too good for them last year. But let's move on to the Ravens. I don't know how much more I want to say other than what I said earlier. They're a very good football team, and I think they're the favorites in the AFC right now. I think that's about all I have to say. Devontae Walker and DeAndre Hopkins. Let's see this throughout the season. If those like, I mean, I say that kind of just like jokingly because like they're probably not going to give you much. A 33-year-old DeAndre Hopkins and a Devontae Walker who's still very unproven. But like, if those guys could turn into like legitimate threats, I think that's how this Ravens offense like reaches their peak. Like, if you have to worry about Devontae Walker hitting a deep play or Hopkins just kind of like beating his man one on one, like 1 to 2 times a game, combine that with their elite run game and Zay Flowers, who's looked really good, Mark Andrews presumably still being able to play, although he hasn't really shown that this year. I think that's how you get the highest version of this Baltimore offense. Okay, this is pretty long at this point. I still have a lot of teams to go over. So, for the second time, let's speed things up. Although this one, maybe not too much because the Steelers are my favorite team. So, I'm maybe regretting this bell curve right now, but I think I'm just biased. I don't know. I put these teams as being like equal. I think if these teams played 100 times, I think that each win about 50 of them. They're just I think very similar teams. There's some injuries this game which I think affect things. Devon Witherspoon is out. Derek Harmon is out. I think that contributed to the Steelers' run defense being pretty poor. We saw that last week too. It's Keanu Benton not that stout against the run. Isaiah Loudermilk is not not a player you want out there as much as he has been. We'll say that. And yeah, I think the Seahawks just better able to capitalize on the Steelers' mistakes and injuries than the Steelers were. The Seahawks obviously are missing Devon Witherspoon, and yeah, the Steelers really aren't able to turn that into passing success. So that's why I gave the Steelers a 40% game and the Seahawks a 55% game. This game is a little closer than I think the score and those percentages would suggest, just because, Caleb Johnson doesn't have that dumb play, and the Steelers are now driving at the end of the game, only down by 31 by a touchdown. Yeah. So even though it's a two touchdown game at the end, really it was closer than that. I think the main thing here is that Caleb Johnson play. That's what the Steelers are going to be remembered for. From what I've read, it seems like that was the Steelers aren't concerned about Caleb Johnson. It seems like they trust him that that mistake happened. And yeah, that was a really boneheaded play, but I think there's still confidence in him. So that's encouraging. I feel like he's just not playing on offense too much because the pass blocking isn't there on third down. But yeah, I think he's going to be fine. That's a bad play, but it happens. Other than with the new kickoff rules too, it's not a huge deal in my mind. With the Steelers, yeah, Broderick Jones has looked really questionable. I think you might be trying to replace him this offseason if he continues to look this bad. Jalen Warren looked great, man. I really wanted Caleb Johnson to get the starting job, but not really anymore, man. Caleb Johnson is he's a dog, dude. I don't know how else to say it. He's just a great runner, great receiver, explosive power. Despite being undersized and maybe not being the best at the goal line, he looks fantastic. Last thing I want to say about the Steelers is once again they kind of struggle in the red zone, particularly like in the 5 to 10 yard range. I love getting that contested ball to DK Metcalf and he turns that into a touchdown. Like, let's just lean more into that. The Steelers have struggled just to score touchdowns in the last 2 years, and it feels like they shouldn't. Like, just throw the ball up to DK Metcalf or Darnell Washington. They did on a 2 point conversion, and yeah, they both came down with it. I think like you don't have like an elite power back without Najee anymore. Caleb Johnson maybe can do that kind of stuff, and Jalen Warren kind of like falls forward, but he's maybe not like the best goal line back. And Aaron Rodgers is at this point, I don't think his game isn't super conducive to being an elite like inside the 5 yard line scoring, just because you don't really have that like rushing threat that I feel like makes Josh Allen or Lamar so dangerous in that inside the five space. Like, let's just throw some contested balls to those big guys and see what happens. I think for the Steelers, I'm not really concerned. The defense does not look great, but if the defense of Broderick Jones can step up, especially, I think the Steelers are going to be able to make even like a decent run in the playoffs because Aaron Rodgers and their receivers and offense as a whole seems to be doing well despite poor O line play. Yeah, with the Seahawks, just take care of business against the Steelers. I think you capitalize on their mistakes and you win this game. JSN has continued to look good. Cooper Kupp had a great game. The Seahawks O line protected Darnold reasonably well. Again, said this last video, but TJ Watt just continues to get chipped like every play, and that is working. Which is not really his fault, right? What are you gonna do when you get chipped every play? Yeah, Kenneth Walker is a great game. The Steelers really have struggled against now him and Brees Hall. Brees Hall looked explosive, so but the Steelers were stout against Charbonnet, so maybe there's something there where they struggled to defend like quick, just kind of twitchy running backs. But yeah, you love to see that with Kenneth Walker. He didn't make a big impact week one. So just him, Torrey Horton, AJ Barner, Cooper Kupp, JSN getting involved. Jake Bobo being a menace on special teams. You love to see all those hit. I think the Seahawks, they're just a solid team. Their defense is very good, even without star players like Devon Witherspoon. Their D line just it is very solid. And love to see Byron Murphy continuing to develop. Okay, so let's move on to the Rams Titans game. I don't know how much analysis I'm gonna have here. I think there's a pretty large gap between these teams. The Titans might be the worst team in the NFL at this point. And the Rams, I think, are a top 6, 7 team. So I give them a huge gap here over the Titans. I think the Titans have to play about an 85% game. So they have to play outstanding, and the Rams play average. And even then, I don't even know if the Titans take that game. The Rams, I think, might have to play like a 30% game for the Titans to even have a chance to like win. There's the Titans kept it close, which is I think why I didn't make the gap even bigger. But yeah, they kept it close at first. I think their defense is just they've had flashes. L'Jarius Sneed hasn't looked the best, but like Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry playing decent have helped them out. And the Titans are just they're like below average at everything, but like horrendous at nothing. Maybe the O line is bordering on that horrendous point, but yeah, they were just playing decent in the first half. The Rams didn't look super electric, but in the second half, that all changed. The Rams, yeah, just take care of business, turn it on, and kind of just roll past the Titans. So, yeah, takeaways. Alec Ironmaner looks good. Cam Ward is just showing good improvisational skills. Not a surprise, right? But that's good to see that that's translating. You just like him to be a little more consistent, maybe down to down. Which he's a rookie playing on a not great team. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing him continue to grow in his confidence and get more comfortable with Ridley and especially Io Manor. Tony Pollard looks fine. The defense is okay. Hopefully JC Latham can get back on the field and continue to develop. His career has been off to a bit of a rougher start, I'd say. And about the Rams, it was just it was like a slightly above average game for them, man. I don't know what else to say. This They didn't play poorly really in any sense. They played well. I think the reason I put them at the 55 is Puka Nacua looked good even by his superstar standards, and Blake Corum really had some good plays. I think if you can take a little bit of the load off of Kyron, and get Corum involved a little bit more, I think that only improves your offense. Just yeah, kind of having a bit of diversity in that backfield, especially like to prevent against an injury and whatnot. But yeah, the Rams just take care of business, man. They're a good team. I don't know what else to say. So I think we're just gonna end the conversation there. Okay, so we're gonna stay in the NFC West here with the Cardinals game, my other favorite team besides the Steelers. I thought both of these teams played quite poorly. The Cardinals defense looked great at first, obviously getting that fumble recovery for a touchdown and then the interception. I was so hyped for the Cardinals defense. And then they just like give the Panthers like a ton of space the rest of the game. Like they just played like bend don't break like to the extreme. And yeah, Bryce Young had like 50 pass attempts and kind of just took what was there. Not enough to end up winning the game. I'll talk about kind of how that happens, but I don't know. I think I really didn't like that, especially in the second half. Like your defense was working with what you were doing. So even if you lose, all of your starting corners, Max Melton, Garrett Williams, and Will Johnson, all are not playing by the end of this game. Like it wasn't really them that was, making the biggest impact at the beginning of the game. Let's continue just to be aggressive in the back end and letting our D line just do their thing. Which ultimately is what won them the game, but we'll talk about that later. Overall, it's not a great game from the Cardinals. I thought the defense, despite their early flashes, didn't look too great, and with the injuries, you hope Melton, Williams, and Johnson will be back. Seems like Melton's injury may be a little more serious. That's just what it seems like at the time. Maybe that's completely wrong. But yeah, you hope those DBs are going to be back soon. But very unimpressed with the Cardinals' offense, too. Like, Marvin Harrison Jr., they said something in the game. I don't know how to feel about it. They're just like, the announcer is saying, like, he's like a quiet guy, doesn't really demand the ball, which is like, fine. It would be fine if he was doing a little more. That's what I'd say. So I don't know if I have any takes about Marv yet. Like I praised him week one. I think he looked pretty solid, but this game just literally not an impact at all. And I that's not what you want to see as a Cardinals fan, being super stoked about like your supposedly like generational receiver. That's just been disappointing. He and Kyler just don't really seem to be on the same page. And yeah, I don't know about Kyler Murray at this point, guys. If he continues to play like this, I think the next year, the year after, is the end of his contract, and I don't believe he would be coming back. I just don't know how much elevating he's doing for this team besides his one insane run or scramble he gets seemingly every game. So for that reason, I gave the Cardinals a bit below average. And the Panthers just also didn't play well. I don't think the Panthers are on the same caliber as the Cardinals, which you see just in the difference between where these bell curves are. But yeah, they just didn't play a good game. You know, the final stats may look good just because, as I said, the Cardinals are giving them space to do whatever they want underneath the field. So Bryce Young was just like force feeding Jatavion Sanders. Like, oh my gosh, I that was hard to watch. Just them throwing like Jatavion Sanders like a curl, like or a short like in breaking route like every play. It's like, what am I watching? Especially as someone who I think started Tedero McMillan in two fantasy leagues, maybe just one, but I have them in both. I really wanted them to feed him more, but they didn't because everything was open underneath. And yeah, I don't think the Panthers played great. Their O line gets pretty beat up this game. And even despite that wasn't playing great, the defense didn't play great, which isn't a surprise. So for that reason, I have the Panthers playing a pretty bad game. You know, they still could have won, to be fair. Like they shouldn't have, which is why I made the gaps between like how the Cardinals and the Panthers actually played pretty large as you see the gap between those two skinny bars. But yeah, if Calais Campbell doesn't save this game, like if the Cardinals don't overcome their DB injuries by beating the Panthers' injuries on the O line, they don't win this game. If Calais Campbell doesn't get that sack, the Panthers probably win. And yeah, the Cardinals really tried to lose this game with like the penalties at the end too. Just as a Cardinals fan, did not enjoy watching their performance here. So that's all I have to say. Is trying to go a bit faster. So I hope both of these teams continue to play better because I think these teams could both like make it to the playoffs even, and honestly neither of them are playing like it right now, but I do believe in what's going on in Carolina and Arizona right now. Okay, so we've got 4 games left. I've only seen one of the remaining four, so we're gonna go through the others pretty quick. This Bucks Texans game, the Buccaneers sneak it out on the road. Man, what a last drive by Baker Mayfield. I did watch that last drive as it was happening, and yeah, that was extremely impressive against a good Texans defense. I think both of these teams are very solid right now. I think the Texans they should be a better team, man. If you just gave them like a competent O line, this is gonna be such a good team. Like with Stroud and throwing to Nico Collins and the other guys, like I they should be good. Just that whole line is just really making Stroud's life difficult, and I you hate to see that. Their defense though is very solid. Held a good Bucks team just to, yeah, not a whole lot, right? The Bucks kind of did have a good ground scheme, but yeah, I think if the Texans stop the Bucks at the end of the game, they're being talked about much differently. But it's there's a lot of concern I think for Houston with that O line. I think there's not really much else to say. Like we know the Texans offense is going to be good if that O line can step up and they, can get Joe Mixon back, which may or may not happen. But Chubb has looked, I think, okay. Um, he's been okay. I actually haven't watched out the Texans game to be fair, but yeah, I think the Bucks they're 2-0 without Tristan Wirfs, which is and Godwin, which is pretty nice. You love to see that. So even though it hasn't been the prettiest, I would say, you're happy about that. They're just a good team, the Bucks. And yeah, I think Baker is just he's a tough guy. I think he got a little banged up in this game and just continued to run, finish the game out. So you love what's going on in Tampa. They're a solid team. I would say they are a bit better of a team than the Texans at this point, although I think these are both very solid teams. And yeah, you're just hoping for yeah, some injured players to come back for both of them and expect these teams to yeah, get a little more airtime on this podcast going forwards when I actually watch their games. It's just hard to watch the Monday night games for me sometimes. So, yeah, that's it. Okay, so the other Monday night game, I watched the first half of this one, the Chargers Raiders, and I was very unimpressed, particularly with the Raiders, mostly because I was counting on Brock Bowers to win me a fantasy game, and he did not have a great game, which I can't get upset at Brock Bowers. I think it's just because he was hurt and he could play, so the Raiders are probably just like, hey, let's get him out there. He's not going to be the main focal point of our offense, and I don't think he really practiced this week, so he probably wasn't involved in the game plan. But yeah, for the Raiders, not a great game. Obviously, Geno Smith with 3 picks doesn't even look that good, but I think with the Raiders, maybe the biggest story, it could be nothing, right? But Dylan Laube, however you say his name, being out there like at the end and over GT. Maybe I think GT had a few like poor pass blocking reps, which is maybe why they did it. But I would hope that the Raiders would lean on GT a bit more. Like when you take a running back at 6, which is I think the highest a running back has gone since Saquon, like you want to see them use him more. So like please do that. I don't know. I think yeah, I don't think cause for concern for the Raiders. I think they looked really good last week against the Patriots, but again, no Gonzo on defense, so maybe take that with a grain of salt. But they're playing against a good Chargers defense here. Um, so yeah, I'm not really concerned. Well, I hope they use GT more. I think this Raiders offense has the potential to be really good, but games like this probably, I would say, mean that the Raiders aren't a serious playoff contender. You would love to see their offense just get even little something going against a good defense, just because you'd expect them to be a bit better. For the Chargers, man, they look really dominant. Justin Herbert is playing great football. You just see the vision of the Chargers really not full effect, but it's taken form even in year 2 of Harbaugh, right? Little weird with the Hampton usage. Again, this is like the game of the 2 rookie running backs, and I think you would have penciled this game early on. Um, as yeah, a game you'd be excited for watching these 2 guys play, and there wasn't much to speak of. I mean, there's what 67 combined rush yards. That's pretty sad. So, but I mean, hey, the formula's working for the Chargers. Quentin Johnston is, yeah, I made jokes about him being like super good in Brazil, Brazilian Megatron. I think that's a good nickname for him. Actually, I like that. That's funny. Yeah, he continues to impress. Pick him up in fantasy if no one else does. He's probably going to end the year, I would say, with over 10 touchdowns. I think no one else in this Chargers team is going to be threatening him much for those. So, yeah, he looks solid. I think just if the Chargers keep playing like this, I'm concerned about the Chiefs' double magic of them winning the division, but I would say that the Chargers are probably like the betting favorites to win the division now. I think with the eye test, that just lines up. Okay, so on to the second last game, the Falcons Vikings. I didn't watch this game, but I've heard a decent amount of coverage about it. Let's start with the Vikings and JJ McCarthy. Sucks he ends up getting hurt in this game, but 2 interceptions, 3 fumbles, 1 loss, man. Like other than like the fourth quarter against the Bears, he just hasn't looked that good, and that's pretty concerning. The Vikings have a talented roster. They're, I would say they're in a window, especially just with Flores and O'Connell being as good as they are right now. And you'd really hate to have the season lost due to bad quarterback play. So this is JJ McCarthy is a rookie for all intents and purposes, but him missing time here really sucks. So I'm just interested to see what this team will look like with Carson Wentz. I don't know how much I have to say. Just the Vikings are a good team, but JJ McCarthy has really struggled, and yeah, you're not gonna do much with a quarterback who is struggling in the NFL, especially when he's struggling this much. I think their defense plays well against the Falcons offense, which especially because they're missing a few guys. Like Cashman was out, AVG, AJ Van Ginkel was out. So yeah, that's a good performance. We know their defense is good, so I think I'll just transition to the Falcons at this point. I think with the Falcons, the biggest takeaway is you love what their defensive rookies are doing. You can see in the stats, Bowman and Watts each end up with a pick. And I heard that Jalen Walker and James Pierce had good games. So yeah, you love to see that, you know. You obviously you invest what, three first round picks in your defense, plus a little more with Watts, who I think was a third, and Bowman. I don't remember where he was drafted. I think he was after the third, but you invest a lot of draft capital into your defense, and you know you're pretty concerned when they let Grady Jarrett go. It's like, what does this team look like? But I think Ruka Roro, that was a horrible Scoopy impression. If I don't cut this out of the video, just I'm so sorry you had to hear that. Um, yeah, he's been good, and um, yeah, and you see, I think you're pretty excited about this Falcons defense, which I don't know if you have been able to say that um, the last few years. Also, I'm definitely leaving that in the video, by the way, so you're welcome. But yeah, man, they don't really give Penix much of a leash here, which is totally fine. I mean, if you can win the game off your defense and Bijan, he's back to Bijan, not Bijan. Thanks, brother. Um, yeah, you're gonna do that. You know, you have a great run game, so why throw it if that's given how the Vikings played, the only way you probably lose this game for the Falcons is if Penix really has a disastrous game throwing the ball. So completely fine with that. I'm kind of excited for these Falcons going forward. Week one wasn't super inspiring for me, I'd say. It kind of just looked like the Penix games from last year, which is like cool. He's playing okay, but this team doesn't look great. So yeah, this game they really showed something else. With the Vikings, we might be a few weeks away from like full panic on them. Okay, so the last game, I saved this for last, even though I said I was going to go chronologically. That definitely did not happen. But I think this was the most interesting game, at least coming into the week, not leaving it, that's for sure, was this Eagles Chiefs game. So let's talk about the bell curve a little bit. I think the Eagles are a bit better of a team right now than the Chiefs. I think both teams haven't looked that great so far. The Eagles' defense is kind of absurd, which they're picking up where they left off from last year. But man, their offense just does not look good. I mean, I think if you're listening to this podcast, and especially this late, you probably know the stat that like the Eagles had one pass completed of like over 5 air yards, and it was kind of just a moon ball to Devonta Smith that he comes down with over Trey McDuffie, which you probably don't want to test that too often. But yeah, Jalen Hurts just he has not really been good. He's done like the bare minimum, but that's about all you can say, man. Which I personally think is kind of average for Jalen Hurts. He really turns it on in the playoffs, even more for the Super Bowl. But if you take his last like 40 games overall, it's pretty unimpressive, especially if those 40 games you take are all regular season games. Like they really just don't want him throwing the ball more than he has to. I don't really know what to do this with this game though. I put them just both at a 50%. I think with how these teams are right now, like yeah, it's just an average game for both of them. The Eagles end up winning I think their defense is a little better, and they have Saquon Barkley. I think that's just what it comes down to. Even though you know, said Jalen Hurts didn't do great, I think their defense had a good game. The running game looked pretty solid against the Chiefs team that, yeah, pretty stout against the run, especially against Saquon in the Super Bowl. And for the Chiefs, man, I think they have a lot of upside going forward, actually. Like Josh Simmons, I imagine he's going to keep on getting better and better. What a tackle by him on Andrew Makuba, who had a great game. Shout out Andrew Makuba and the rest of that young secondary, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. Yeah, Makuba has looked good, which is that's fun. That's just a great pick. Jihad Campbell, better week one, but I actually don't think he had that good of a game this game. Maybe he did, but that's not what I saw. I don't know. I didn't really think he had like any impact on this game. But yeah, man, Eagles defense is pretty nuts. Their pass rush played better this game, which makes sense because Jalen Carter was back. But I think that's about it. That's about all I have to say on the Eagles. Like their offense just doesn't look good. It reminds me of 2023 where they lost Steichen and then their offense looked really vanilla and bad. That's kind of how they look this year. So we'll see if they can turn that around because, it was kind of the same last year too. Hurts was really struggling. But yeah, turning over to the Chiefs, they're missing Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. So you expect the offense to be a little worse. I think they played average. Mahomes has looked really, really good on the ground this year, which is impressive because, it's not a young cat anymore, but he's just so smart with how to run it. So even though he didn't have a great game passing, he overthrows Thornton once or twice. He misses like probably the easiest deep pass of his life to Thornton at one point, but it does make up for it. That and just a few other a little bit of accuracy issues from Mahomes. I'm not too worried about it. I think once the offense gets humming with Rice and Worthy, taking maybe a little more of those deep shots, yeah, I think they're going to be fine. I think the Chiefs' offense is just boring, but it's effective. Like Kareem Hunt is like maybe the most boring running back in the league, but he's good, man. He's better than Pacheco, to be honest. Like Pacheco, like a little more explosive, but just on a down and down basis. Kareem Hunt just gets something a little extra that Pacheco wouldn't. Chiefs O line has been a little better. Josh Simmons looks like a pretty solid pick. I don't think he's blown anyone away, but he has certainly been better than what they had at left tackle. I think Nkiri Amagaji played most of their left tackle snaps last year, at least in the regular season. So yeah, you like that pick. Maybe he's not even fully healthy at this point too, but yeah, obviously looking very athletic on that tackle against Andrew Makuba. But yeah, I think this game didn't really live up to its hype. I was watching it and I got a little bored. I think these are kind of both teams who like are playing football the right way, and maybe for the Eagles they don't want to be. They just don't trust Jalen Hurts too much. The Chiefs kind of have to. And yeah, that just means they run the ball. They run the ball pretty well. They pass the ball short, don't turn it over. And it's not very exciting, but hey, man, it clearly gets the job done. So I think these are both still elite teams. They just happen to play against each other, and you kind of saw that in the game. Cool. So I believe that is all the games. If you've made it this far, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment of what you thought the best or worst part of this episode was, how you liked the bell curves. But yeah, man, I think this was a pretty exciting week two of football. I enjoyed watching a lot of these games, and I most likely won't have a breakdown next week because I will be at a work conference, but I will try to make some sort of video over the weekend coming up just so I can put something out as I'm trying to grow this channel. But yeah, man, if you've made it this far, have a good rest of your week. And yeah, continue to enjoy football. See ya.